The dressing room door slams shut. Bing Crosby stands motionless, staring at a man he hasn't seen in 15 years. The silence is heavy. Outside, the film crew waits. No one knows what's happening in there, but everyone senses it. Something is about to explode. To understand what happened that afternoon at Paramount Studios, you need to understand who Bing Crosby was in 1954, and more importantly, who he used to be. Hollywood in the 1950s was an illusion machine. The studios controlled everything. Contracts, public images, even secrets. Paramount Pictures was one of the 5 great empires, and Bing Crosby was royalty, the most popular man in America. Smooth voice, easy smile, the crooner who sold millions of records and filled movie theaters. But this image had a price, and someone had helped build it. Crosby wasn't a lucky newcomer. He was a calculating veteran. 25 years in the business, dozens of films, an Oscar on his resume. He knew every trap in the system, knew when to smile for the cameras and when to close the door. His dominant trait wasn't talent, it was control. Crosby never left anything to chance, especially his past. Then, in March 1954, Paramount announces White Christmas, a prestige musical. Big cast, big budget. Crosby accepted without hesitation, until he received the crew list. One name made him stop: Eddie Conlon, assistant director, the man who knew too much. Conlon had worked with Crosby in 1939, behind the scenes of East Side of Heaven. Back then, Crosby was at his peak, but off-camera he was someone else. Explosive temper, drinking, fights with directors. Conlon witnessed it all. He witnessed the night Crosby smashed a whiskey bottle against the set wall after an argument about musical timing, saw the producers cover it up, saw the actor being escorted out at 3 a.m, stumbling, while assistants cleaned up the glass shards. But Conlon never talked, remained loyal, and then disappeared from the industry for a decade. Came back in 1952 quietly, accepting smaller positions on secondary productions. Never mentioned Crosby, never tried to make contact. Until now. The first week of filming was tense. Crosby avoided Conlon, changed corridors when he saw him, asked assistants to relay messages, but Conlon didn't back down, did his job, remained visible, polite, professional, as if nothing had happened. Others noticed. Danny Kaye, co-star of the film, asked Crosby if everything was all right. Perfectly fine, he replied without taking his eyes off the script, but his jaw was tense. His hands gripped the paper with unnecessary force. In the second week, Conlon was assigned to supervise a dance rehearsal with Crosby. It was inevitable. They needed to work together. The rehearsal started normally. Crosby executed the steps with mechanical precision. Conlon gave technical instructions. No eye contact. No words beyond the strictly necessary. Until the choreographer called for a 10-minute break. The room began to empty. Dancers stepped out to smoke. The pianist went for coffee. Crosby remained at center stage, adjusting his tie. Conlon organized notes at a side table. The silence between them was heavier than the sound of the music that had played minutes before. Conlon approached with his clipboard. Bing, we need to review the blocking for the third scene. The director wants... Crosby didn't respond, kept staring at the mirror on the wall. Bing? Silence. Conlon took another step. I just need 2 minutes of your time. Crosby turned slowly. My time? The voice came out low, but there was something dangerous in it. You think you have a right to my time? Conlon stopped. I'm just doing my job. Your job, Crosby repeated, sarcastic. And how did you get this job, Eddie? Tell interesting stories during the interview? The choreographer returned at that moment, stopped at the door, sensing the tension. Other crew members began to return, immediately realized something was wrong. Crosby and Conlon faced each other at center stage. No one moved. I don't know what you're talking about, Conlon said calmly. Crosby took a step forward. No? 15 years, Eddie. 15 years without showing your face. And suddenly you reappear. Here, on my film. His voice rose slightly. Think I'm an idiot? Think I don't know what you're doing? Conlon maintained his posture. I can explain, but not here. No, Crosby cut him off. Right here, in front of everyone. He opened his arms, theatrical, turning to the frozen crew. All of you think you know me, don't you? Saw my movies, heard my songs, know everything about good old Bing. He pointed at Conlon. But this man here knows different stories, stories worth money. Isn't that right, Eddie? Conlon didn't look away. His voice came out firm. I never wanted your money. Then what do you want? Crosby practically shouted. Why are you here? The silence that followed was absolute. Even the sound of equipment seemed to have ceased. Conlon took a deep breath. Because that man I met in 1939 wasn't you. It was someone broken, someone lost. And I never judged you for it. Crosby blinked. The anger in his face wavered. Conlon continued. I followed your career from a distance. Saw you become a father. Saw you create charitable foundations. Saw you mentor young artists. You changed, Bing. And I never told those stories because they don't define who you are. Never did. No one breathed. Crosby lowered his arms slowly. Then why come back? Why now? Because I needed to work. Conlon replied simply. Because I have bills to pay and a family to support. And because I thought 15 years was enough time. That you'd trust that my silence was real. Crosby looked at the floor. His hands trembled slightly. When he raised his eyes again, something had changed in his face. My dressing room. Now. It wasn't a question. The two left the stage. The door closed behind them. The crew remained motionless for long seconds before someone nervously whispered, Should someone? The choreographer shook his head. Leave them. Inside the dressing room, Crosby poured 2 glasses of bourbon. His hands still trembled. He sat heavily in the armchair. Why did you protect my reputation? Conlon accepted the glass but didn't drink. Because I saw my own father destroy himself with alcohol. Saw what pressure does to good men. And I recognized that in you. Crosby took a long sip. I was a monster back then. You were a sick man, Conlon corrected. There's a difference. I broke things. Yelled at innocent people. Lost entire nights in blackouts. Crosby's voice was heavy. And you saw it all. I did, Conlon confirmed. And I saw you stop drinking in 1940. Saw you become the man you always should have been. Crosby raised his eyes, surprised. How did you? Because I pay attention. Because I cared enough to follow. The silence that followed was different. There was no tension. Just 2 middle-aged men sitting in a cramped dressing room, carrying decades of unspoken history. Crosby finally spoke. I spent 15 years waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for you to go to a newspaper, to a rival producer, to sell everything. Never crossed my mind, Conlon said. Those memories don't belong to me to sell. They belong to you, and you've already paid for them. Crosby wiped his eyes quickly. Why are you being so generous? Because every man deserves the chance to be judged by who he became, not who he was at the worst moment of his life. Crosby placed his glass on the table, remained silent for a long moment, then extended his hand. Thank you, for everything. Conlon shook his hand firmly. You don't need to thank me. You just needed to trust. When they returned to the set 40 minutes later, the crew pretended normalcy, but everyone noticed the change. Crosby and Conlon worked together for the rest of the production, not just professionally, but with genuine respect. Sometimes, even with lightness, they were seen having lunch together twice, laughing about something during a break. White Christmas premiered in October 1954 and became the highest-grossing musical film of the year. But for those who were on set that day in March, the film meant something else. It was proof that the past doesn't have to be a sentence, that silence can be an act of love, and that true character isn't in never falling but in who you choose to be after you get up. Years later, at Conlon's funeral in 1968, Crosby was one of the pallbearers. He didn't give interviews, made no public statements, but those who were close saw him whisper something as he said goodbye to the body. No one heard the words, but some swore. They saw tears, because some debts cannot be paid with money. Some loyalties don't need to be proclaimed, and some men keep secrets not out of fear but out of love. Conlon took those stories to the grave, and Crosby lived the rest of his life honoring that silence.